All right, it is 12:02, and we are calling the special meeting for July 12th, 2021 of the Electric Utility Board meeting to order.
It's 12:02. Today is Monday, the 12th of July, 2021. I'll call the Lubbock City Council to order in a special meeting.
Item 2, I don't believe we have anybody signed up for open comment. No emails either. All right, we are now recessing into executive session in accordance with 1 BTCA Government Code 551.086 on competitive matters of LP&L, 2 VTCA Government Code 551.071 seeking advice of and consultation with LP&L's attorneys on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with Chapter 551 of the Government Code and seeking advice of its attorneys about pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offers. And 3, VTCA Government Code 551.074 on the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, and/or duties of a public officer or employee. We are now in exec.
Lubbock City Council will hold an executive session today for the purpose of consulting with staff regarding competitive matters of the public power utilities under Section 551.086 of the Texas Government Code, to discuss pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offers, and to hold consultation with attorneys under Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, and finally, to discuss personnel matters under Section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code. It is 12:05. The Lubbock City Council is recessed to executive session.
All right, it is 1:03, and the regular Electric Utility Board meeting, or special EUB Board meeting for July 12th, is now back in open session.
Mr. Chairman, it's 1:03. The City Council is back from executive session, and they stand adjourned for the day.
Thanks, sir. Mr. McCullough?
Good afternoon, Board.
Good afternoon.
It is with great deal of sadness under item 6 that I wanted to report that Andy Burcham, our Assistant Director and Chief Financial Officer, has accepted a position with Lubbock Christian University. He's going to be leaving the organization towards the end of this month. And I just wanted to make that statement publicly and just express my appreciation for Mr. Burcham and the job that he's done, the superb job that he's done. He's been a key member of our staff, even since before I started here in 2014. He's worked long and hard on a number of really important projects that we've had underway, been a key member of the team and the successes that we have enjoyed over the last few years. Andy has been a key contributor to those things, and I wish him well at LCU. I think it's a job that he's well suited for. He's got the background and experience to handle that job, and I'm sure he's going to do a fantastic job for them as well. So I hate to lose him, but I wish him all the best. Anything else under item 6 that y'all would like me to address?
Any other items or comments? Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. McCullough, I would join your comments concerning Mr. Burcham. I think over the past nearly 8 years, there's nobody in business or government that I would express greater confidence in his professional abilities and in his character and integrity, and would just tell him how much I have appreciated the opportunity to have worked with him for nearly 8 years. Thank you, Andy.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. McCullough, I say the same thing. I think, Andy, you've served in some capacity for the city and LP&L for over 21 years, and as a board member, ratepayer, and as a citizen, appreciate your work and wish you the best. Thank you, sir. All right, that brings us to item 7. Mr. Burcham is now on the panel.
LSU has called me home. I grew up on that campus. My dad taught there for almost 40 years, and I grew up running around on their campus as a kid, and then went to college there and all that. So anyway, sorry to take a moment there. Is it not on? I'm sorry. But anyway, it's been a real pleasure, and I'm going to miss each and every one of you, but I'll be showing up around here and there, citizens or public comments or something like that.
Sir, you only have 3 minutes.
Especially at budget time next year, I'm going to get on Joe, so no. What we're really here for today, let me get over to the slide, is to talk about the fiscal year 21-22 operating budget and capital program. So it is our pleasure to present that to you. We sent you a digital version at the end of last week. Hopefully you were able to look at that, and then we provided you with hard copies today. Just real quickly, it is a draft, and we're here today to for y'all to ask questions. It's not set in stone at this point in time. We certainly want to hear from you if you have any issues that you see as we go through it. So we've labeled it draft. We'll be back to you next week to present the proposed budget, and we'll incorporate any changes y'all have today and or anything that we have between now and next week that may need to be changed. But just very quickly, there is a table of contents at the beginning of that book, and I always like to point out that there are a couple of areas, if you don't look at anything else, to look at least a couple of things. Narrative overview. And I don't mean just y'all, I meant the public in general. I know y'all look through the majority of it. The narrative overview is a pretty detailed explanation. It brings out all of the issues that we address, all the assumptions that are used throughout the document. So it gives you a really good flavor of what is coming up next year, as well as in 5 years after that. The financial model on page 11, to me, is kind of the center of the book. It is the one kind of high-level look at the revenues and expenses of the utility, and will give you a really good idea of what's going on from now and into the future. You skip down a little bit to the capital appropriation area. That is going to be the listing of all the capital projects for next year and then the next 5 years after that, followed by a lot of detail. The majority of the book is made up the detail of those capital projects, but the high-level summary is on that capital appropriation page. And then also in the document is the tariff that we'll be presenting to you and to the council over the next number of months. We have provided both in clean and red line. You'll notice this year there's a lot of red lines to it, but it's mostly just clean up and being a little bit more concise. Before I start on a high-level aspect, I certainly wanted to give thanks where they're due. You all know Joe Jimenez, who is our financial planning and analysis manager, does a phenomenal job. He leads a team made up of Daniel Garcia, who happens to not be here today, and then Tanika Thomas, who is next to Joe right there. They are an exceptional group who work also very long, hard hours, and are a group that are very methodical, very accurate, probably the most accurate group I've ever worked with. I find very few errors, and they just do an exceptional job. So I wanted to point out their hard work on this. Also wanted to point out special thanks to Hunter Harrison, who works in the General Counsel office, and the good work he did this year on the tariff updates. He was the mastermind behind a lot of that, making that a lot easier and more customer-friendly. And then also thanks to all the department heads across the utility who work with Joe and his group and provide a lot of really good information and give them their estimates of what the upcoming timeframe looks like. So anyway, we have a really good group to work with, and wanted to point that out before we go through the budget. So what I want to do right now is just go over a few financial model considerations that are incorporated. Showing on the screen is that page 11. That's the document I'm talking about that I feel is, at least from a numbers standpoint, really points out what we're doing and where we're headed. So it does point out the revenues and expenses between now and fiscal year 26-27. So the next budget year plus 5. Throughout that entire time frame, we are still not recommending any base rate adjustments. The series of 4 base rate adjustments that concluded in October of 17 were sufficient to continue our operations and covering our capital program for a number of years. So we were able to hit that on the head at that point in time, and we don't anticipate anything going forward. This budget does incorporate an increase in our principal and interest payments related to the ERCOT integration that we've just completed. So that is in there. I'll go over a little bit of detail on these. It also has an increase in the transmission cost of service revenues and also the hold harmless payment that is netted out of that amount going forward. So you'll see some big increases in revenues for that. You'll also see a big change in this forecast from last year's forecast. We've reduced some capacity charges, and this has to do with the early termination of the SPS partial requirements contract that you approved back in May. So last year, our financial forecast included about $17 million a year in costs going out into the future. Those have been eliminated in the forecast in this budget. What this also incorporates is a shift to the retail market operating standpoint going forward about 2023. At least that's the current plan, and obviously that takes a vote of the board and council to make that official, but we have incorporated that in the budget to help you understand how that impacts the utility going forward. Also incorporates significant capital investment as we aim to move the remaining 30% of our load from SPP to ERCOT. That entails quite a bit of distribution. We've been focused on transmission for the last several years. Now we'll turn our focus to distribution upgrades to get the remainder of those customers over. And it also incorporates what's called a market transaction management system, which will be our ability to transmit information from our meters to ERCOT and to the retail electric providers for them to do their billing for once we go into retail competition. So that's incorporated there as well. So you'll see also into the future, we basically reduce all of our exposure to purchase power cost beginning in June of 2023. So you'll see in our departmental expenses under purchase power, those costs going to a very low number except for transmission costs, because we'll continue to pay for transmission in ERCOT. And then finally, the budget does incorporate a 3% merit increase for our employees. That may change between now and next board meeting. The city has not yet completely determined what that merit increase will look like for the city employees. So once they have made that determination, we'll incorporate that in our budget as well to basically imitate what the city's doing for their employees. So just to dig in just a little bit more before I turn it over to Joe, again, this no base rate changes. You'll see to the right for both Rate 1 and Rate 3 residential customers, that service availability charge has been constant since October of 17 at $8.07. And then the energy charge differs a little bit between the Rate 1 and Rate 3 customer, but under right around 3 cents per kilowatt hour, or around $30 per 1,000 kilowatt hours for that customer. So the two areas on that pie chart in blue, the light blue and the dark blue, those are the numbers that haven't changed since 2017 and that we don't expect to change at least through 26-27 fiscal year. The rest in green is the variable purchase power cost pass-through that has been increasing of late just due to the higher natural gas prices. But we anticipate that going up a little bit more next year as we anticipate natural gas continue to rise, but not as dramatically as it has over the last year, hopefully. Again, I mentioned a moment ago about our increase in our debt service. On this chart, you will see in last year's budget, we had about $17.7 million in principal and interest payments on our debt. That'll increase to about $34 million next year, so that's an increase of about $16.3 million in debt service costs. So a significant increase there. However, I also talked about the revenue stream and a net revenue stream. So that's our total revenues from transmission cost of service rates, net our payment of that hold harmless payment, which is about $22 million a year, would net about a $19.6 million revenue for 21-22, which is more than enough to cover that increase in the debt service. And that's really what it's intended for, is to cover those costs. So our customers are not bearing the burden of that increased debt payment, but it's socialized across the ERCOT system. Again, I mentioned a moment ago about the exit, the early termination of the SPS partial requirements contract. Last year in our budget, you'll see, we had forecast $17 million and growing in annual costs for capacity through that contract. In this year's budget, that's reduced to about a $4 million a year estimated debt service payment. So we really saved about a minimum of $13 million a year going forward every year into the future based on the exit of that contract. Capital program, and Joe will go into more detail about that, but the basic of this slide is that shifting again to distribution. You'll see almost 60% of the capital program over the next 2 years relates to the distribution upgrades to get us the remaining 30% into ERCOT. So over the next couple of years, a little over $40 million for that. And then a little less than $12 million over the next couple of years for that market transaction management software that we'll need to install to prepare us for retail choice. So those you can see are the drivers of our capital program. We do have our regular annual projects which run between 13 and 14 million a year. That's for growth in the city and extensions for distribution lines for the most part. But the bulk is still made up of this effort to move us, the remaining load, to ERCOT. And then my final slide is just a high-level look at the overall operating budget on the expense side of the equation. We're lowering our budget about $9.8 million in total. The left-hand side of the slide just kind of dissects it. We split it into two. The left-hand side is the power cost pass-through. The right side is operations. So you'll see we're down about, I think it's about 21 million, or 22.7 million is the reduction from last year to this year. Most of that had to do with last year we made that $24 million payment to SPS for the hold harmless payment. That was part of that purchase power cost. That does not happen again this year. So we have about a 22 million savings on our power pass-through. And on operations, we're up about 12.8 million. And the bulk of that has to do with that increase in the debt service that I mentioned a moment ago, is accompanied with a new revenue stream. So that kind of gives you an overall look. The operating budget itself in red, you'll see, is only up about 0.2%. So we're doing the best we can to maintain costs and not grow those too substantially to run our operations. And then transfers in the gray at the top is down a little bit. We had some one-time transfers to the general fund last year that don't occur this year. So we see some savings there. So anyway, at this point, unless y'all have any high-level questions, I want to turn it over to Joe, and he'll dig into the details and give you some better understanding of what's incorporated in our budget this year.
Questions before? Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, Andy, I had some questions on page 11, just the out-year models, but I don't know if you want to let Joe go ahead and...
We can do that now if you want, or if you want to...
well,
Joe is going to get into the specifics on like categories
line.
within. So, I mean,
okay.
If you want to wait till he may answer your question.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He may
okay.
answer my
Okay.
question. So,
all right.
Okay.
That's good.
Good afternoon, board members. Before I begin, I wanted to make sure, I wanted to make sure everybody that wanted a hard copy of the budget book has got one. I know y'all received the electronic version, but if anybody else wants a hard copy who doesn't have one, I can get you one before I begin if you want to write notes or anything like that on that.
I think we're good. Thank you, sir.
You good? Okay. Good deal. Well, good afternoon again. As Andy mentioned, I'm going to go into provide you all with a presentation that goes into detail and walks you through our fiscal year 2021 proposed operating budget and capital program. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the major changes from last fiscal year as compared to this fiscal year. Again, this is meant to be an informal presentation, so if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to stop me and I'll answer any questions that you may have. The first section that I wanted to go over was our total funding sources excluding our PCRF revenues. As you can see, our general consumed meter base rates are the majority of our funding sources. They come in at $67.4 million, or 62.5% of our total funding sources. These are the revenues generated from our base rates. Next comes in our TCOS revenues. This is the net of our TCOS revenues coming in at $19.6 million, or 18.2%. As Andy mentioned again, our regular TCOS revenues come in at $34.2 million, but they're offset by a $14.6 million ERCOT hold harmless payment. So if you take the net of that, it's going to be $19.6 million in TCOS revenues net for next fiscal year. Our franchise fee equivalent, or FFEs, come in at about $12.5 million, or 11.6% of our total funding sources. These are strictly 5% of our these are strictly based on 5% of our PCRF revenues. Our transfers come in about 3.3 million, or 3% of our total budget. And the remaining other funding sources total of 5 million, or 4.7%. In this next slide, I'll break down a little bit further those other funding sources. Of the remaining other funding sources, our fees and charges total 2.6 million, or 51% of our total funding sources for the remaining funding sources left. And these are fees calculated from our late fees, reconnect fees, and disconnect fees. Our interest earnings are about 900,000, or 18%, and these are the yields that we receive from our investment portfolio. Our outside work orders generate about 1 million, or 20.7% of our total funding sources in this section. And these are the fees related to the commercial and residential development line work that we go out and do for new construction. Our rentals and recoveries are coming in about 200,000, and our tampering fees are about 100,000, and the sale of equipment comes in about 100,000 as well. And the remaining miscellaneous costs are minor, but they all total up about 200,000, or 3.4% of the remaining funding sources. On this graph right here, you can actually see the percentage change of all our funding sources from last fiscal year compared to next year's proposed budget. And as you can see, our total overall funding sources have decreased 4.3% as compared to last year's budget. Our interest rates are up 123,000, or 15.9%, due to the increases in short-term interest rates. Our sale of equipment is down 49,000 due to anticipated lower auction proceeds from the sale of vehicles and equipment proposed for next year. As you can see, our base rates remain relatively flat, and this is due to no proposed base rate increase for fiscal year 2021-22. So those have remained relatively flat for next year. Our franchise fees are down 1.24 million due to the revenue recognition for that 24 million hold harmless payment that was paid out to SPS in this current fiscal year. Our work orders and streetlight revenues are up 176,000 due to a proposed 20% rate increase for commercial and residential developments. As you all know, last month y'all approved that our work order and streetlight fees are now in our tariff and will be approved by y'all through the adopted budget for this fiscal year. Yes, those will be effective October 1st. And lastly, our transfers in are down, as Andy mentioned, our transfers in are down 2.6 million due to a 1.5 million decrease in capitalized interest and a one-time payment received from the general fund of 1.2 million for its transfer for water and its portion of the Lake 7 reroute costs that were done last year. So as you can see, all these changes, all these net effect changes equal up to the 4.3% decrease in our funding sources for fiscal year 21-22. Next section is our operating expenses. This graph provides you with a overview of all our proposed fiscal year 2021-22 expenses, excluding our power pass-through costs. I will go into detail on each of these costs in later slides, but I just wanted to point out that, as you can see, the major costs are our capital-related costs and our transfers out. Our capital-related costs total about 58 million, or 52.3% of our total costs. And these costs are related to the transfer of cash for our capital projects, our indirect costs, and as well as our debt service principal and interest payments. As Andy mentioned, we did all that. We have issued bonds for all the work we did on the transmission, so our debt service payment and interest payment have increased substantially for the next fiscal year. Our transfers out total 17.8 million, and these are related to our franchise fee and pilot fees, as well as a debt service transfer to the general fund for our portion of their CIP. For fiscal year 2021, we are proposing that we're to add 9 new FTEs for next fiscal year. As you can see in the administration department, we have eliminated 1 communication generalist position, and this was a vacant position that we decided that it was not needed going into the future. In the distribution department, we have added 3 new We have requested 3 new FTEs for next year. One is an assistant transmission operation supervisor who will be responsible for overseeing that we're in compliance with ERCOT and NERC. And we have also added 1 journey line worker and 1 streetlight maintenance worker to the streetlight department. This is just to adequately staff them with the increased workload that we have in our streetlight department. And as you can see, the major one is the 7 new person transmission crew that we have coming on for fiscal year 21-22. This crew will be solely responsible for maintaining our transmission assets and our lines. As you recall, in this fiscal year's budget, y'all approved a capital project to purchase the vehicles and equipment for this new crew due to the long lead times on that. So now that we have the vehicles and equipment, the FTE positions will come on next fiscal year. In the customer service area, there's a net increase of 0 FTEs. We added 1 utility system analyst, 1 collection specialist, and 1 lead utility service operator to, again, assist with the increase in the customer service workload area. This increase, however, was offset by a decrease of 1 lead utility meter tech and 2 utility meter tech positions. These positions were vacant and are no longer needed now that we have transitioned to AMI. The transition to AMI also allowed us to reduce our field service and meter reading departments by 8 FTEs since 16-17. And in previous years, we did mention that we would do away with most of the meter techs once we went to AMI, since there were no longer that many manual reads needed as we transitioned to AMI. So we have reduced that by 8 FTEs since 2016 and 17. So as you can see, the overall request for this is 9 new FTEs for next fiscal year. With that being said, our compensation has increased from $17.9 million to 9. Yes. I'd have to get there. I'm not sure how many vacant positions we have in the customer service, but it's a highly turnover department, and we.
Last time we were right around 300 employees, and we've got 336?
Yeah, 336 employees.
We're
yes.
never 100%.
It's the staff.
We never 100% full. We always have vacancies that we're working on filling.
So we're about 300, we've got 36 vacancies basically, we're asking for 9 more.
But keep in mind, that's a constantly churning number, because we can tell about how long those positions are vacant, but it's just a cycle that continues.
So, and again, the main driver of the increase is the transmission department, which is mostly fully staffed at all times. And now that we are becoming more of a transmission provider, we definitely need to make sure that we have a professional staff that's solely dedicated on any transmission work. Just to be reliable now that we're in the ERCOT market. So again, that's the biggest driver of the increase of the 9 FTEs for next year.
Ms. Stafford?
In terms of the journey line workers, are we pretty much in the market salary-wise for those folks, the transmission, those journey line workers and distribution?
Yeah, and we really are. Last year we did a budget amendment was passed to increase the base level of the journey line worker just to be able to compete with the other utilities in there. So that journey line position has been increased over the past year, the starting salary to compete with other utilities. Yes.
So has our turnover rate gone down on the distribution and transmission side?
I really believe it has. We don't have too many vacant positions in that area. Those are people that we try to recoup that have experience and try to maintain that level of staffing. So. Good. Okay. And again, with that being said, we're requesting the increase of 9 FTEs, which has increased our compensation from $17.9 million to $19.3 million for next fiscal year. As you can see, the $883,000 increase is strictly related to those new 9 FTE positions, as well as a reclassification of 5 SCADA operators to transmission system operators. Our terminal pay has gone down 59,000, and that's based on fewer employee retirements expected for next fiscal year. Our temporary salary costs have gone up 41,000, and this is based on the use of temporary employees in our customer service department as well to assist with the increased workload. And then, of course, you see 510,000 of that is related to the 3% merit increase proposed for next fiscal year. And as Mr. Bertram mentioned, you know, this can go up or down, this can change as depending on what the city's final merit rate increase is, as we want to be consistent with what they increase. So if they go a little higher than 3%, we'll do that. If they go a little bit lower than 3%, we will do the same as well, just to be consistent across the board. Yes, sir.
Mr. McCullough?
I want to address Mr. Fields' question in a little more detail. The positions that we've had trouble with recently and the ones that we've lost, customer service representatives, and I think our pay level is below where general retailers are paying employees to come into work. So we've lost CSRs to Sam's Club, Costco, places like that where the job market has really tightened up recently. And the other positions that we've had trouble with are analyst positions, computer programmer type positions. I just think there's a high demand for that, people with that skill set, and so we're actively trying to recruit analyst positions, but having a little difficulty there and having to use outside consulting help to fill in the meantime. The other position that I'm familiar with that we've lost recently is transmission system operator. We had one that left for a much higher salary in New York, so I don't know that that's really a fair comparison, but we've done generally pretty good in that category. The engineering positions is another one that we need to take a look at. We're trying to fill some vacant engineering positions that have been vacant for a long time. We were able to hire an engineering manager recently to fill a position that had been vacant for quite some time, so I have hopes that we can bring some technical folks in. But the lineman position has been pretty stable. To answer your question directly, since the salaries were reset about a little over a year ago, we've not had any significant losses in that area. So that's been very helpful that we got that adjusted.
Mr. McCullough, is there any chance of adjusting the salaries in the customer service section? Because I remember that was a constant turnover, and some of that management was training customer service reps for other companies, as you said.
Yep.
And that's been going on for years. Is there any solution in sight for stabilizing that turnover?
You know, that's something we need to take a look at. I don't know how our salaries compare with similar positions at other utilities, but that's something I will visit with the HR director about.
And based on that, you know, on the increase in compensation, you will see that benefits follow suit as well. So, you know, that we have an increase of benefits of $548,000 for next year as a direct correlation to our increase in compensation, along with a 10% increase in health benefits that the city has proposed for next fiscal year. Our maintenance areas, our maintenance department has increased slightly from $2.5 million to $2.6 million. As you can see, the major driver of this is an increase of $116,000 in our fleet administrative charge and our increased maintenance for motor vehicles and trucks. You know, as we continue to try to get the most useful life of our vehicles without replacing them very often, you know, you do expect that the maintenance costs to keep them vehicles running do increase a little bit. But that has reduced our replacement vehicles, and it's a lot cheaper to pay for some maintenance costs instead of replacing the whole vehicle. So that's the main driver of the increase in our maintenance department. Our professional service and training budget has decreased from $9.4 million to $9.1 million. The major driver of this decrease is a $70,000 decrease in compliance costs due to less filing fees related to compliance documentation associated with NERC and ERCOT. Our legal department has also decreased by $500,000 due to lower legal fees related to the purchase power contract negotiations that we had over the past couple of years. Our KUBA bank charges and billing support have increased $42,000 and $82,000 respectively, and this increase is just based on the usage of those KUBA bank charges that we use to process payments. And you can see our contractor services did go up by $204,000. This was due to an ARC-FM maintenance and support software, an emergency transmission maintenance contract that's new for next fiscal year, and as well as ERCOT required annual testing and certification of EPS meter locations. Our scheduled charges did go up quite a bit. They went up from $6 million to $6.9 million this for next fiscal year. And if you, of course, you can see the main driver of this increase is a $1.4 million increase in our property and liability insurance premiums due to the claims that we've had recently, loss history, and the volatility of the insurance market. You know, and of course, you know that the city's department, risk department, is the one that goes out and gets these insurance quotes for us, and we did work with them to see if we could lower these costs, but you know, there's just less and less people out there that are providing insurance for the type of industry that we're in. So there's few choices out there to select from, and so these are the costs that are proposed for next fiscal year on that. Helping offset these increases, it was a huge decrease of $455,000 in our IT services. This was due to the decrease of the elimination of our utility billing software and our Oracle software related to our CIS system. Utilities have also gone down $26,000 due to lower anticipated water charges for next fiscal year. Other expense categories with some changes or supplies. Our supplies increased for next year $186,000 or 14.9% due to a one-time purchase of safety equipment for the new transmission crew that is coming on. Like I said, this will be a one-time expense, so the supplies will go back down to normal levels next year. Our other charges did increase $41,000 or 3.1% due to increase in contracts costs for tree maintenance, as well as an increase in car allowance expenses resulting from the addition of full-time positions required to perform field work. The next section is our power cost recovery factor. As Anthony mentioned, our power pass-through costs did go up a little bit for next fiscal year. They've gone up from $194.8 million to $196.1 million. And as you know, every month I present to you our purchase power costs, and those include all our capacity, demand, transmission costs that are related to, and fuel costs related to energy. So there is a slight increase from last year to this year, as you can see on there. And then to the graph on the right, I wanted to really go over this. You know, as you can see that our last couple of summers, our rates have been relatively low. But again, this is all related to the price of natural gas. On this next chart right here, you can see that when our rates were really low in the summer of 2019, we were paying an average of 73 cents per MMBTU of natural gas, and last year that went up to $1.26, and we are currently averaging about $2.93 per MMBTU. So you can see from the summer of 2019 to where we're at now, that's a 133% increase of natural gas prices. And this is directly correlated with our increase in energy costs. Of course, you know, it's a pass-through cost, so whatever we're paying for energy, we have to pass on to the customer. And this pie chart shows you, you can see our energy fuel costs are the majority of our purchase power costs. They come in at about $126.5 million. Our transmission costs come in at about $52.6, followed by our capacity charge of $17.1 million. On this chart, you'll see our energy and fuel costs have increased from $121.7 million to $126.5 million. That increase in cost is strictly driven by anticipated high costs of energy in the SPP and ERCOT markets, of course, again, due to the increase in natural gas prices. Our transmission costs have increased from $42 million to $52.5 million for next fiscal year, as LP&L will pay a full year of transmission costs in ERCOT along with SPP transmission costs. Of course, as you all know, SPP transmission costs are on a one-year lag, so we're paying for last year's transmission costs. So next year you will see the transmission costs come down substantially, as we will only have our 30% load in SPP for this year. Capacity has also decreased $30.9 million to $17.1 million. And this is solely related to the termination of the 400 megawatts capacity contract that ended on May 31st, 2021. Again, as you know, ERCOT is the energy-only market, so the only remaining cost we have for capacity is the 30% of our load that remains in SPP. And next is our fund level expenses. Our debt service increased $16.28 million or 92% due to the increase in principal and interest payments related to the issuance of revenue bonds used to fund all the construction and transmission projects that we had to get upgraded in order to be prepared to integrate into ERCOT, along with other major system costs. Our capitalized interest has decreased $1.55 million or 50% due to a decrease in the capitalized interest payment on the outstanding 2017 and 2018 30-year revenue bonds. You know, the more we pay those off, the less interest we gain on those revenue bonds that are outstanding. Our direct purchase note program fees have increased $180,000. As the note program will be extended to provide interim financing for our major capital expenditures in fiscal year 21, 22, 22, 23. And, you know, as we mentioned, if y'all approve that, I think our plan is to use note proceeds for all the distribution work coming online now. It was a very good tool or mechanism that we use for the transmission costs. And we think it's beneficial that we use that also for the undertaking of the new transmission or distribution overhaul to our capital projects. Our transmission system inventory decreases $1.6 million, as this was a one-time expense related to the purchase of necessary inventory items that we have purchased this year. This is inventory items we had on standby for all our new transmission system in case for, you know, weather events or anything goes out. We did have spare parts in stock. Our indirect cost allocation increased $0.15 million or 8.8%, primarily due to the increased expenses in the city's administrative costs. Additionally, the new 9 FTEs that we have requested have added to this cost as well. Our FFE and pilot has decreased $1.13 million and $200,000 respectively, or 7.9%. Of course, this is due to the $24 million whole harmless payment that was paid out to SPS last year or this current year. Our transfer to capital did decrease $1.05 million or 4.8% due to the utilization of unallocated cash from savings and closed-funded capital projects. So, you know, every year we go through our projects that are closed and we determine how much funding is left in those projects. So this year we were able to utilize $1.05 million of unallocated cash to help fund next year's capital projects. And I just want to take a moment and pause here. I know that's a lot of information I just gave you on the slides, but I think I wanted to stop and give you an opportunity to ask any questions that y'all may have or have on any of the presentation slides. Yes, sir, I sure will.
Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, Joe, I'm going back to page 11, the summary deal, and this is more concerns the out years than the current budget. I just want to make sure that I have a good grasp of our model going forward.
Okay.
So beginning in fiscal 23-24, when we'll materially be a wires and poles provider, where we have the general consumers metered income and the PCRF income, that's notionally then what we'll be charging as our fee that would go on people's bills. In other words, we're combining a couple of things there to pick up what would be that revenue. Does that make sense? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. So it will be, sorry.
So
If you look at that page, in the orange section and in the green section, those two together
yeah,
what we'd be passing through to the reps, the retail electric providers, would be the general consumer meter. That's going to be a line item on their bill.
yeah,
And then the first line in the orange, that'll be on there, and then the green line on the franchise fees.
okay.
So those three will go together, I believe. That's correct. Yeah.
So the T cost that comes from the total system. In other words, that net, the 43 less the 22, that comes from the system.
Yes, sir. That is
Okay.
just the rate. That's just the rate of return on our transmission assets that's approved by the PUC.
Okay. So currently what we call general consumers metered revenue, that's the 3.381 cents basically.
Yes.
So it's going to be a little north of that by the time you put everything in to that projected total. If we're talking about everything, that would be our portion of the I'm just trying to understand the model, right? So the 69 million in fiscal 23-24, is that,
That is the 3.3 cent
That's what I
basically
thought.
base charge, but it won't be on our bill any longer. It would,
Right.
It'd be on the retail electric provider's bill
Right.
as a cents per kilowatt hour.
Right,
rate,
right,
just like
right,
it is today for our customers.
so that difference is just going to be whatever it is. Now, you mentioned the franchise fee equivalent, so that rate's going up, I guess. Or is that,
Yeah, that rate
or
is.
we're estimating
It's been converted to a cents per kilowatt hour, so that'll
Okay.
also be on the retail bill.
and I remember we discussed that, but I don't,
And
it kind of,
it's to basically be equivalent to the revenue stream that on average the city's collected over the last say,
Over the
5
last-
years.
yeah.
So we tried to do something that was fair because it's volatile right now as
Yeah.
purchase power costs go up and down, that goes up and down. But if we then peg it to a cents per kilowatt hour charge, it'll be much more stable revenue stream for the general fund, but it will be about the same level they've seen on average
okay.
over a period of time.
And that's going to convert, I know it's a certain percentage right now, but it'll convert to a kilowatt hour in 2023 when we go over? Okay, okay. All right, and y'all bear with me. I know we talk about this every year, but so the other thing that stuck out to me was simply, as we move forward, we're basically projecting using our accumulated liquidity to meet these cash flow needs. In other words, we're using our general reserve.
Yeah.
So,
You see it coming down
right,
as purchase power costs go
Comes
down.
down.
That's the multipliers, the
Yeah.
percentage times the revenues, and as that goes down, our revenue requirement,
Right.
policy reserve limit comes down as well. So
Okay.
yes, you're correct. We're
Okay.
using up that excess policy level reserves to fund mostly capital.
yeah, okay. Because in effect, our need for that liquidity reserve goes down. So we're using cash that we built up in the past to meet those
Yeah.
those needs till we reach a different level.
And it makes a lot of sense because we're losing the volatility of our revenue streams or our expenses. And so you really, much less risk, you need a lower reserve policy.
Right.
It kind of goes together hand in hand.
Okay. But that is going from, let's see, it's about $30 million between 2021 and 2026, if I did my math right. So we go from 73.6 to 42.8, and then it bounces back up after fiscal 27, if I'm reading that right.
Yeah, well, we didn't pull that down in 27. That would either indicate we can spend more on capital in that last year, or we can reduce rates in that year for
Okay,
customers.
yeah.
So yeah, we have a lot of surplus. After
still
we've made
have-
all those hold harmless payments, we'll begin to have surpluses if we left everything the way it
Yeah,
is today.
once we've paid all that off.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Well, I just want to make sure I was clear on that, because that's going to be a little bit different. I don't know, we'll have to calculate what that is, average per kilowatt hour for a residential
In our
customer.
model, we do that because we want to compare, what would that look like on the retail electric provider's bill, and how does that compare to the other
Yeah,
providers in ERCOT, just to make sure we're not out of range. And we're right in that range with all the other,
Okay.
Encore, AEP, all of those
okay.
others.
And the other thing this doesn't include is any cash value that might be present from a potential polar,
Correct.
say
That's
paying
not
us
contemplated.
for the right to be the polar,
Yeah, it's
which has been a,
There's probably a lot of things that need to be tweaked when we get closer to understanding more exactly how that's going to impact operations. The retail electric provider, we've put in what we know for the most part at this point, but I'm sure there's some
Yeah.
ups and downs. And that's why we've left some excess in that last year of this
Right.
model, because we know there could be some expenses that maybe we're not completely aware of at this
Yeah.
point in time as we morph into that business
Okay.
model.
okay. I just want to make sure that I'm getting the model correct and what our overall, because this is really kind of a cash budget it's not completely cash, but it's it's really kind of a cash budget going forward. So, anyway. I think that covers my questions. Thank you, guys.
Good questions, good questions.
Other questions for Joe?
Okay, with that being said, then we'll move on to the capital program section of our 2021 budget. As you can see on this chart right here, there's 25 new projects requesting monies for fiscal year 21-22, which total about $61.3 million. 6 of these projects are related to our annual projects for overhead, underground, transformers, streetlights, distribution meters, and system upgrades, and that totals that comes out to about a total of $10.6 million. We do have 2 substation projects, Yellow House and McDonald capacity upgrades that are going to run us about $2.8 million. We have 1 transmission fiber optic communication that's going to run us about $1 million. And as y'all aware, we brought this up. The Cook Station GT3 control system replacement project is going to run us about $900,000 to get GT3 up and running, or finished out and up and running. We have 4 distribution projects for expansions, upgrades, downtown underground, and the truck barn expansion, which total about $9.9 million. Our annual vehicle replacement this year totals $2.6 million, which just replaces vehicles that are up for renewal. We have, as Andy mentioned, we have that ERCOT TDSP, which is the MTM project, and that's going to run us about $7.4 million next fiscal year. And as you can see, the majority of our capital for next year are capacity upgrade projects. We have 4 of those projects coming on next year, which total about $24.6 million. And, this is just a high-level overview of our capital program. These are all, every capital project is listed in our budget book, along with the details and the cost for each capital project. Again, this is a pretty high price tag for next fiscal year. It comes in about $61.3 million. Again, we are really working on our distribution projects now. So if you can see, after this year, our average annual program is roughly about $37 million out in the future. And this one just provides our significant capital investment. As we've harped on it a lot lately, we really upgraded our distribution and transmission system. As you can see, our distribution is about 29.2% of our overall capital program, and transmission comes out about $54.8 million. These areas are the areas that we really focused on in the past couple of years and the next 2 years going forward, just to make sure that we beef up our systems. Now that we're in the ERCOT market, we want to make sure that we have a reliable system going forward. Again, and that's the last section on the capital, unless y'all have any questions on that.
Questions? Thanks, sir.
And our last section for the day is our tariff and rate schedule. If you had a chance to look at the proposed budget, you'll see that there's a lot of red lines in the new tariff for next fiscal year. And I just wanted to let y'all know that, a lot of these changes were just made for clarity and consciousness. Many changes were made to incorporate definitions to be used throughout the tariff. We have not previously had a definition section in our tariff, and we added one Hunter and Jenny did a good job of adding one this year, and it provides clarity in the document to adopt defined terms throughout. They also provided further clarity on intentional interruption of service and further clarity on responsibilities of the customer and LP&L. They also put some language in there to conform with Senate Bill 3 regarding critical care customers and critical industrial customers. We also added sections for the additional elaborate a little bit more on additional reasons for refusal of service. And finally, they added more language to show the responsibility of customers to maintain that the right-of-way is spelled out more clearly to provide LP&L access to its facilities. And the final thing on the tariff is the demand cap. Of course, we've been phasing out our demand cap since fiscal year 2015-16. Again, we're proposing the 7th year of this phase out. And as you all know, the demand cap provides a discount on demand charges for certain customers and incentivizes inefficient use of the distribution system. The demand cap will be incrementally phased out until all customers are paying the amount of power they consume. This phase-out, however, the phase-out does ensure that no customer will see a more than a 20% increase on their bill year over year. An example of this is, a customer with 124,800 kWh and 51, with the current cap, they're paying at the current cap 29 hours, they're paying for 4,303 of the kWh of the 5,100 that they actually use. With the new proposed cap at 25 hours, which is a variance of 4 hours, they will be paying 4,992 kW instead of the 4,303 as last year. That's a variance of 689 kW. And on this chart right here, you can see this shows the number of customers affected. So for last year, we had 362 customers that were benefiting from the demand cap, which means that they weren't paying for all the demand that they use. With the demand cap set in place, 362 customers were benefiting from the demand cap. Now that we have increased this to the 25 hours, that has gone down from 362 customers to 313 customers, which is a total of 49 customers. So for the next fiscal year, we will still have 313 customers that are benefiting from the demand cap and not fully paying for all the demand that they use. So again, with this is, it's hard to just cut it off completely. So we phased it out 20% every year, where the customer is not affected by more than that amount. And so for next year, there'll be 313 customers that are still benefiting from the demand cap.
Are the customers made aware of this?
Yes, this is something that we've been doing. We have made them aware. This is, again, the 7th year that we're doing that, and they know that it's increasing 20% every year. Yes, sir. That ends my presentation. Like I said, I know that's a lot of information to pass on to y'all, and y'all just received the budget books on Thursday or Friday. So, but if you have any questions along the way or from here to next time when we do propose the budget to y'all, by any means, feel free to reach out to us or to David or Andy or myself, and we can address any questions that you may have or that you see in the budget going forward.
Any other questions or comments for Joe?
Thank
Yep,
you, sir.
good job. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. If there's no other items in the open session,